So hopefully the noise will be gone. As it is not, then we can have proper physics lecture. And on Wednesday, we introduced some security concepts. And in general, for cybersecurity, although it is quite a hot and active term in the internet, the idea of security was back to in 1980s or even earlier than that. So for computer security or cybersecurity, this general field wants to deal with these three fundamental questions. The first one is, what are we going to protect in the cyberspace? And the second one is, why do we need to protect them? And what are the possible threats and attacks in the cyberspace? And the last one is kind of a core of cybersecurity. And how can we protect those assets in the cyberspace against the motivated and determined cyber criminals? These are the three fundamental questions in cybersecurity. And it's the, what happened here? It's a core of the whole course in this semester. It's a core of the cybersecurity field in general. And some of you have attended this. And so first one, what are we gonna protect in cyberspace? Any of you have some idea? What are we gonna protect? In general, we want to protect something, but when we come to a little bit more depth, what are we trying to protect? Yes? Bank details, okay, yeah? Yes?
Assets and information.
Assets and information, yes, good. Some other, yes?
Computer systems.
Computer systems, yes. What you have described are kind of the assets, the objects that in the cyberspace we want to protect. And when you talk about banking information or banking details, we want to protect these banking details wouldn't be read by unauthorized entities, wouldn't be read by others, wouldn't be read by even some employees in the banking system. Right? So we want to keep the content of the data to be confidential against the others. That's the banking details and some other details. And for computer systems, it's a quite a general term. And of course, we want to protect them. And when we want to study this subject, we would like to know more details. We want to break this system into pieces. And then we look at each piece and try to figure out what are the most important properties of this piece, this component in the cyberspace. And then formulate some of these properties. And we kind of abstract most of these properties from different systems, because although we have many computer systems out there in the network, they share a lot of commons. And as a field of cybersecurity, then we want to get the essential properties of these systems and what we call it as security attributes. And what we really want to protect is to keep these attributes, keep the properties of these elements. So we, on Wednesday, we have covered some attributes. These are the things we want to protect in cybersecurity. And the first one is the confidentiality. That's the secrecy of something. And then, like the content of an email, the content of a bank account, a content of some files, some students' grade. So when it comes to a specific file, specific data, we are talking about to protect the confidentiality of this thing. And when we talk about a computer system, then we are trying to protect this system be accessed by others. So we are trying to control the access to this computer system. So this is about the confidentiality of a file, of a data, and of a computer system in cybersecurity. The second one, integrity. That's something like we want to keep, like when we talk about data or files in a system, we want to make sure that if we type something, we store the file in our system. And we don't want there to be some hackers hack into the system and modify the content of the file, and we have no way to recognize it. In general, if we are working on a Word document, write something, some report, it can be easily detected. But when you learn more and when you develop a system, there are thousands of codes, thousands lines of code in your software, like in your project. Then if there's just a one minor bit is changed, like at some condition in your program, okay, it changed from replace 10 by 20. Then for you as a developer, how are you able to find this minor change in your file, right? That's a problem, and that's the property computer security wants to protect. And when it comes to system, we want to have a software that can work properly, functionally, as it was designed. We don't want to, okay, we download the software from an internet and then opens up, then it does not work as we expected. Then that's something we want to avoid. That's the integrity of data and the process or softwares in a system. Another one, availability. For computer systems, mostly we use it for make our life easier and to enjoy the services by the computer or by the network of computers. That's the internet. Right? We want to fetch some information from the internet, and we want to buy something from a website. So these websites, some of these systems in the network, they are providing some services to the visitors, to the customers. And another important property for computer system is to provide functional property, functional services to the users. These three are known as the CIL triad. So these three are the key concepts in cybersecurity. And when you talk to others about cybersecurity or read some articles in the internet, when they talk about security, then you can think of what are they really talking about. Are they talking about a system is not available, or are they talking about some bank details in a bank was released to the public? Or are they talking about some stock information in some stock company was modified due to some attack? So when we talk about cybersecurity, we want to make it more clear what are the properties we are talking. And especially when we talk about some cybersecurity incidents, you can see these incidents at the headlines of news every day. And it's very important to keep this in mind. These are the key concepts in cybersecurity. And it was well established in the last 40 years. In addition to these three attributes, we have another two attributes that was proposed by researchers in cybersecurity community. And they are also important because the previous three attributes, they are not that inclusive. they cover a lot of important properties, but not cover all the important properties that the users or an administrator of a computer system wants to have. So another property is authenticity. This property means that some entity in the system is genuine, and it can be verified and can be trusted. And the process of verifying the authenticity of an entity in a system is called authentication. So these two they are come in the same place. When we talk about authenticity, it means the property of some entity in a system, like a human being or a user in a system, or maybe in some system, the role of someone in a system, in our organization. We use a general term, entity, for this. And authentication is a process to verifying the entity of the authenticity of that entity. And another important attributes is called accountability. This means that some actions in a system of an entity can be uniquely tracked to the entity who has taken that action. So in this case, if some bad guys, hackers, has done some malicious or unauthorized actions in a system, then we want to be able to track that entity. And this information can be used as evidence to a third party to like send fine to this entity or to send this entity to the court with this evidence. So these are the 5 attributes in cybersecurity in general. And for the subsequent lectures, we will learn many security controls, countermeasures, or techniques to protect some property of them. And for example, we will learn cryptography in next week. Then it will be used to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and accountability, and also authentication, like these 4. And by using firewalls, it can be used to protect integrity of a system, to make sure only authorized user, only authorized traffic can be allowed to access a system in a network. For availability, that's more about to have some backup, to have some recovery plan when the system cannot provide services as expected. So keep these 5 attributes in mind. That's the core of cybersecurity. And there are some other attributes. We mentioned them on Wednesday lecture, so I don't want to repeat this again. So you will have these slides today. And the reason is I have updated some of the content, and now it's finalized, and I will upload it at UIB. So we mentioned on Wednesday lecture, we want to protect some assets, some attributes of assets. You see, you mentioned computer systems. If we want to have a proper protection on this system, then we need to break them into pieces. It's not just a general thing, then we have a 100% protection on them. That's not possible, unfortunately. So we need to break them into different categories. And each category, they have their own feature. Then some of the techniques can be better applied in some of the attributes, the assets, instead of like treat them as a whole. So if we think a little bit more, like we have a computer system, or like here, laptop, or a mobile in the internet, then what do we have? We have the hardware. We have something in hand, right? And that's the hardware part. Like if your mobile with your family photos was stolen, then whatever the techniques that protect your files in your phone won't work because you cannot get your device, right? So we need to, of course, first of all, protect our physical devices. And for individuals, we always keep our eyes on our devices. And for an organization or for a university, then and some of the servers, they are sitting in the server room, then they should be properly protected. Like only a few people can have the key for the server room, right? That's some protection for hardware. And on top of hardware, if we have no operating system in the hardware, then it's just okay, some device, and it cannot be used, right? And we also need to provide protections on operating systems. You know, there are many operating systems, and for mobiles and for computers and for some small devices. And they all have this operating system or firmware that can establish the bridge from the software to the hardware. Then we also need protection on the operating system. Then on top of it, we have applications or mobile apps. And there are many mobile apps out there. And most of you will be software developers, and you are creating these apps. And different developers, they have different skills. Some of them can make very solid software. Some of them can make rather buggy software. It cannot be functioning quite well. And some of them contain a lot of vulnerabilities. So then come to that part, we have so many things to protect, like when we come to application. And we don't just use applications. As individuals, as users of applications, we also create data, valuable data for ourselves. And in fact, mostly for individuals, we want to protect our data in a system or created by some softwares. And on top of it, we want to protect human beings because it's not uncommon that some critical systems can be used to hurt the human being, hurt the whole society. There's one example, like the nuclear system in Iran was hacked by US, and to prevent some potential terrorism attack, something like that. We will mention this, like this quite famous attack later. And so you have this picture. And we have different assets in cyberspace, and we want to protect the security attributes of these assets. And unfortunately, there are many cyber criminals, hackers, and some organizations. They are interested in breaking to our system and to steal our data, to read our data, or to corrupt some process in some systems. So they have a general term, we call them adversaries. So basically, these adversaries, they want to take some unauthorized actions against our assets that violate some security attributes. Then in all of these, like you have different pieces, different elements in each of these terms. Then as long as there's one attribute of one asset is violated by some, like here, like a hacker, then we call it it's a security attack. So that's why, like, if you search for cybersecurity attack, you get a lot of these incidents and news, and they are quite different. Sometimes it could be quite overwhelming and confusing, like what this attack, they also have this general term, okay, security attack or cyber attack. But in fact, when you read it in more detail, then you will find they may refer to different things. So somehow we are in the war of this cyberspace, and we have introduced the security terminologies in Wednesday lecture. And first one, the vulnerability. The second one, the threats. And when threats become true, then it is an attack. So for threats and attack, basically it means some unauthorized action against some security attributes of an asset. We also mentioned some types of attacks, passive attack and additive attack. So these two attacks are the general classification of all cyber attack. So for passive attack, it does not change the operation or the file in a system. While for the active attack, it modifies the operation of a system or of a communication. Last time we mentioned there are like 6 general examples of these 2 types of attacks. The first one, message release. The content of a message is read by unauthorized party, like here. This death is an adversary. He is able to intercept the content between of the message between Alice and Bob here. And we will mention Alice and Bob quite a lot in this course. But keep in mind, they are not necessarily human beings. It can be just 2 devices. And another one, traffic analysis, is try to find the pattern between 2 communicating parties. We also mentioned the masquerade attack. The attacker pretends to be another person, another device in the network. In the real world, it's very difficult to pretend to be others. And there was one famous movie from Hollywood. It's called Change Face or Face Changing, some title like that. It's kind of a movie about pretend to be another person by changing the face. And it's quite a good movie. I recommend it. I like that movie. You know. But in real world, in general, it's quite difficult to pretend to be others, even like 2 twins or 3 twins, because humans are different, right? Like if they are close family members, they're close friend, they may know some subtle difference between them. Then they can tell the difference. But in the internet, in the cyberspace, when one device sends some message to another device, like one sensor in some building, send some information to the backend terminal, then how the terminal gets to know that's a sensor in that room. Right? It's not that easy as in the real world. Right? That's the problem we will face and we will solve. And another one is replay attack. This kind of attack is the attacker tries to capture the message and then resend this message to the recipient in later time. The last one is modification attack. This one is rather nasty, I would say. If it cannot be detected, that causes a lot of problems. And especially when it comes to financial transaction, like 1 more 0 means a lot, right? And how the system can be designed that you send some money, transfer some money to your friend or to a person, then basically send some message. This message was sent from your device, going through several routers in the middle, and then in the end to the bank system. And how to make sure the message along the path from your device to the bank system is not modified. And if it was modified, how can we detect this modification? That's another problem, and we will solve it with some techniques in this course. The last one, that's a denial of service attack. It's a quite common attack to make some system cannot provide services as planned. And in general, one single computer cannot initiate a denial of service attack, or it is very costly to initiate a denial of service attack from one single computer system. And mostly the attacker used a network of computers that were under his control or under her control, and asked these computers to send the message at the same time to the recipient. Then in this case, the recipient system cannot distinguish which of them are authorized requests, which of them are malicious requests. And as a result, the system cannot provide functional services to its customer. In this case, it was called distributed denial of service attack. So we kind of review what we have learned on Wednesday lecture. It might be a little bit boring to some of you who already attended the lecture, and there's not much new, but some of you may haven't attended the lecture on Wednesday. So for me, it's important to emphasize all the important points of cybersecurity. We have seen what we want to protect. We have seen what are the possible attacks there. Then the last thing for us is how can we protect the assets? How can we fight against these adversaries, these attacks? That's the major part of this course. And we will learn some security controls. And there are some measures that can mitigate cyber attacks, and sometimes even it cannot mitigate, then it can be used to quickly detect the attack, and then try to, okay, shut down the system, maybe, okay, keep the system unconnected to the network, and then use some backup system to recover the system from attack. So there are different ways to protect the system. All of them we call security controls or countermeasures. Sometimes it's also called the security mechanisms. There are several general terms that are widely used. And when we try to protect the system, and again, there are many security controls. There are many tools we can use, and we want to clean it up. We want to learn it in bad way, and then we can classify all the security controls into 3 categories. The first one is administrative controls. It's about in an organization, the boss to the top, he wants to have some security in the system. Then he may have a group, and then discuss what are the policies we should have and how can we protect our system organization. Then this is the kind of the process of set up security policies. Then following these policies, it's about how to enforce these security policies in the system and train the employees in the system to behave as the security policy said, or like as a security policy guided. That's the administrative controls. It's pretty much like for you, you want to attend the physics lecture, then there's at the moment due to COVID-19, then we need to have good control. Then there's some student or some staff outside, okay, guide you, okay, you must use the hand sanitizer before you can enter in. And after you finish your course, you are asked to use the antibac to wipe out the surface. So these are examples of controls in real life. And in the systems, it's again, like there are some guidelines how to protect the systems. And this part in general is quite easy because it's like use some expertise from security experts. Then they set up, okay, what should you avoid? But when it comes to how to make all the policy, all the rules well in place, that's difficult because not all employees follow the rules properly. In a system, when it's a big system, then it involves many developers. Not all developers follow the rules. As you can see, this could lead to some vulnerabilities that about the enforcement of some policy rules in a system. In some cases, unfortunately, it could lead to very serious consequences. The second category is physical protection. This part is quite easy. Like as I mentioned, like if we want to protect our mobile phone, then it's better we, okay, keep our eyes on it and sometimes, okay, touch the pocket whether it is there and do not leave the mobile off your side, or when you play with some friends, then constantly keep that in mind. Okay, where's your mobile, right? And in Norway, it's a quite safe place, but I still heard from friends that some of them lost their mobiles in the restaurant when they went to restroom, or like just maybe a few minutes, and then they cannot find the mobile, which was there on the desk, on the table. So that's for individuals. Of like for computer systems, for servers, then it's better to have the system locked all the time. Only a few people and only authorized person can access the server room. And you have seen in movies a lot that for some military base, they set several layers of protection, and they have the fence and they have the safety guard. These are all physical protection. The last one is logical protection. That one is like a software and some security protocols. It's within our devices, and we can download some tools, then we can use them to protect our system. It's very handy for individuals. If you know how to use these tools, then basically you will be definitely in good shape. And in bigger systems, most of them can have pretty good protection, but still mistakes are everywhere. Everyone can make mistake, and even the administrators can make very stupid mistake. And although the techniques, the tools are quite strong and protect very good security protection, but when it comes to practice, things are not always as we expected. That's also the reason we have a lot of cybersecurity incidents. I think we can have a 15-minute break, and then we can continue the second part. Yeah. Just wait. Yeah, trying to see whether it is recorded. Pause recording. Okay, let's start again. So we have stopped at this logical controls from last lecture, and you see there are a lot of these abbreviations, and at the moment, most of them, maybe all of them, make little sense or no sense to you. And after this course, you will know what they mean. And they are the essential security controls, especially technical controls in cybersecurity. And for these controls, another classification of them is for the purpose of the control. And there are several types of security controls. For example, preventive. That's the kind of the first security control we want to have. So when we want to protect a system, and as the engineer, as an expert in the computer system, then we would like to know what are the possible attacks, what are the possible threats in the system, like within the system, what are the hidden vulnerabilities, right? And our task is to get all this information and use the corresponding controls to prevent the potential attacks. Right? So that's the first important step. We always want to prevent some attacks from being happening. And in case for some systems we didn't succeed, and we want to, okay, even the first step fails, but if there's some attack is happening in the system, then we want to quickly detect the attack, detect the unauthorized actions in the system. That's the correct detective controls. And after we detect it, now of course we want to correct the behaviors. We want to correct the systems. And we want to recover the system as soon as possible. Make it back to the normal phase as soon as possible. So this is about the corrective controls. And the fourth one, this deterrent controls. This is a kind of a complementary tools or measures for the other controls. We mentioned accountability. It means if some attackers has done some unauthorized actions in a system, then we are able to track to that entity to find out when this entity take that specific action or some behavior, malicious behavior. And if this part can be done properly, then somehow the attacker will rethink, okay, what if I get caught when I attack other system, right? So this is a deterrent. So to have enough sufficient countermeasures to warn the bad guys. If you attack me, then you are risking that you may get caught, and then you might be sent to the court, or you may have to pay a big fine. So you will be punished seriously if you are caught. And our system has already equipped of many security controls, and we can track you. That's the idea of deterrative controls. The last one, recovery, I already mentioned. So this is a table that kind of divide the security controls according to the first classification, whether it's administrative, whether it's physical, or whether it's logical controls. And for the columns, you see they are preventive, detective, corrective, deterrent, and recovery. So then we can see, okay, what are the measures are preventive measures? What are the measures are detective measures? Yes?
What's the difference between deterrent and preventive?
For the deterrent, it's to warn the attackers that if they attack some system, then they are risking being caught. They are risking paying a big fine. So to make them, it's too risky to attack the system. And also, if the attacker knows this system is well protected, that means if he wants to or she wants to attack the system, he or she must invest a big amount of money, a big amount of time, a big amount of resource to be able to break into that system. Then in this case, the attacker may try to find some other more weak, more vulnerable system to attack and skip this system. That's the major purpose of, or the difference between preventive and deterrent. Yes. Okay, we can continue. You see there's a lot of this, and we have technical controls here, and there are some others, this cryptography, and we will learn next week. And for this ACL, it's access control list. And we will learn after the cryptography section. And for antivirus software, it's also anti-malware software that will be also covered in the software security part. So now we have different security controls. And as a protector, we want to make sure each control is properly placed at the proper the point in the system to make sure all the controls are effectively protecting the system. It's not, okay, you have the control, then you have all the tools, then you just put the controls for everything. Because we have to be more specific, and we have to apply the different tools in different places and to make sure they take most effective protections. And to have this, to achieve this goal, then we need to know where could be the vulnerabilities in the system and what kind of the attacker might thinking and where could be the weak point. Now in these weak points, if we can identify those weak points, those vulnerabilities in our system, and which would open potential door to the attackers. Then, okay, we apply these measures at these weak points, at these vulnerabilities, and to protect the system. So then it's necessary to know this. There are two ways to list all these vulnerabilities. One is attack surface, like where the attacker could attack this system. And so here you see that attack surface is the retrievable and exploitable vulnerabilities in a system. So there are vulnerabilities in a system. This vulnerability may stay in a software, or it may stay in some hardware, or may it be there be some vulnerabilities in the policy in the whole organization. Then first we need to identify where are these vulnerabilities. So this is the attack surface. And these attack surfaces can be network surfaces. And for some of systems, in nowadays, most of computer systems, they are connected to the internet. Then if this system will be able to talk to others and will also be able to receive message from others. And there are different protocols. And for most of systems, we want to have they are only able to talk to the entities for specific service, not other services. We don't want to, like for this, we can take this lecture room as an example. So we only want to receive students in this course. We don't want to have students from other courses in this lecture room at this time slot. So if it's open and no one controls, then there might be some other students sneaking and cause some problem. And in the network, there might be some traffic sneaking to a system and try to gather some information in that system. So these are the network attack surfaces. Mostly it was because some ports are open. These ports, it's like the door of the wall in a room, in a system. And another surface attack surface is software surfaces. And there are many softwares. When it was developed, the developer considered mostly the functionalities, the performance of the softwares. They pay very little attention on whether it might lead to some problem, some security breaches in the software. For example, the buffer overflow, that's a quite typical software issue. It's just, okay, some of this command was not thought properly, and it's just considered. There are some exceptions was not taken into consideration when the developer develops the software. Then it leads to, okay, if the attacker is able to run this software and add some input in the parameters, then it might be direct the command to some other memory in the system and cause some problem. So this is the software attack surface. And for the last one, human surface, that's the most difficult part. Most of the security breaches are due to humans' errors or humans' misbehaviors, like weak passwords or no passwords, or some bad security practice, like use same password for different websites. All of these, we have went through this cybersecurity quiz, very gentle cybersecurity quiz. For some of you, you see, there are some practice that we call it security practice. Most of the people, especially without any IT background, that they have a very weak, very bad security practice. And then it opens the surface for attackers. So it also explains why we have so many security incidents in the news. And to have good protection of the system, it's important to have this attack surface analysis. And in this way, then we can assess the system, and then we will know what, and also what would be attacked. If the system is attacked, what would be the consequence of the attack? And when we are clear about it, then we will take some measures. We will take some action to do something better. And another one, this category is called attack tree. This one is another way to assess a system and to come up with effective measures to protect the system. So from the definition, this attack tree is the branch and hierarchical data structure that represents a set of potential techniques to exploit security vulnerabilities. It's we analyze the attack surfaces, and these surfaces, some of them, they are interconnected. They have some structure, they have some relation. And we want to know this relation and to have a better overview of these vulnerabilities. And then we will use some measures to protect, to avoid these vulnerabilities be exploited by attackers. So this, for example, here, I took this figure from another textbook because the one in the textbook is quite complicated. I choose this one. It's slightly simple, but the idea is quite similar. You see, it's like a tree. And the potential threat, like here, suppose an employee wants to steal the president's mailbox in its company. This is like, suppose an employee here in this example is an attacker, and he or she wants to steal president's box. Then what can this attacker do? What are the ways he can try or she can try? So first, if she's quite technical or he is a quite technical person, then she may try to access the mail server. Then if she get the access, then the attacker would be able to read the content of the president's email. This is one way. And another way, okay, use the mailbox credentials. If this attacker, by some means, are able to get the credentials of the president, then it's he can directly use this credential to log in to the mail account of the president. And also the last one, okay, it's just to come up with what are the possible ways. And for this, to steal his smartphone, it might be not that effective if, okay, it's locked and you cannot use it. But let's look at the first one. If the attacker wants to access the mail server, then two ways. One is to hack into this mail server, then to read all the mails. Another one is, okay, what if the attacker try to hack on the administrator of the web server, because the administrator has the root right. So the administrator have higher privilege than others. If the administrator's credential can be hacked, then the attacker would be able to read all the emails in this web server. That's the idea. And then we can see, okay, how can the attacker get the user, the administrator credential? Then there are different ways. May try to use some social engineering techniques, or try to fool the administrator to install some virus in the system. There are different ways. So that's the idea to, like, okay, if we want to protect the system, then what we can do, what are the possible vulnerabilities? And we look at each of these vulnerabilities and think of what are the ways, what are the tools we can use. Then that's how we do it in cybersecurity. Is there any question for this? Does it make sense to you? Yes? Okay. When we protect a system, there are some strategies to apply security controls. You already see there's different categories of security controls. There are many names, many terms of security controls. And it's not an easy job to apply them effectively. So there are some principles. And in the textbook, they list several principles about the design of security controls, of applying security controls. And here I just took the most important ones. The first one, least privilege. That was used almost everywhere in computer systems. So any entity in a system has the least privilege, has the least right that is required to perform his or her job in the system. It's like you can only have the right that is enough to perform your job, and no more than that. So it's like each entity in the system, they have this restriction. This is for the right-wise, all the user, all the entity has the least privilege. Another one is also important. The privilege that has been assigned to an entity can be only valid for the time period that the job to be performed. After that, the right will be taken. It's like, okay, you are a student. I take myself as an example here. I'm working in the university, so I had the employee account. Then I can log in to my web page, and I can download some research papers I'm interested in. And for most of these resources, the university has paid for it. I suppose I quit my job last semester, and then, or maybe next year. Then after that, it's definitely a proper way that I cannot use my account anymore after I quit the job. It's not just for me, it should be for everyone. And because when a person, when an employee in an organization, when they perform their job, they definitely need special rights, special privilege to perform the job properly. Right? And after that, then it will be leak of right if the privilege was not taken back. That's the idea. That's the first principle, least privilege. Another one is multi-layered defense. This one is also interesting. and quite important. So the goal is to make it more difficult for attackers to further penetrate into a system or a network. It's like in the real world, in the military base, we have maybe several miles away, we have some soldiers then detect some potential suspicious behavior or events. And then we have the fence, we have the safety guard, and like we have different layers. Like each layer acts as a screen to screen out some potential attacks, some potential unauthorized actions. And in the system, it's the same. Like we are in the university. When we connect to our laptop to the university's network, then we are internal users. And for the external users, if they want to talk to some of us, then the external user has to go through different layers. Then before the message can be sent, pops out in our mail, for example. In this case, like this design of multi-layer defense is also helpful. Like when the outer layer has been attacked and has been detected, then it gives enough time for the internal system to either to cut off the connection or to have a more strong protection, or it gives the users, the administrator in the system, more time to react corresponding to some attack in the at the external layer. So that's the idea. So it's this is another figure I took from a textbook. So we mentioned we want to protect the assets. Like here, assets could be the network, could be internal network, and then some applications, some data. So for each of them, you try to divide them into different layers. And when you go into deeper in the layers, then you will have more protection in the system. In the outer layer, like for the university websites, then it's okay, every visitor can visit websites. And when it wants to log in to MIT-IB, then that's another layer of protection. And but when student in the MIT-IB wants to see his grade or her grade, that's fine. But if he or she wants to see some other student's grade, that wouldn't be allowed. So it's another layer of protection. So each of the users, we call it entity in a system, they have restricted right, and if they want to access some other entity, some other objects, then this entity has to go through different layers to be able to read to access some files. That's the idea. And then we have come to a system, the risk assessment. Here I just have a very brief introduction of it. Why do we need to protect the system? We mentioned, okay, we want to protect our valuable assets, and there are many bad guys out there. In fact, we are assessing the risk of losing some attributes of the assets. So like the value of an asset differ a lot. The recipe of your like some like maybe you have special recipe for some food or for some cake, and the bank details. These are both data, and of course they should have different level of protection, right? And you don't lose that much if your recipe is learned by others. So the risk, the consequence is different. I have to plug in the power cable. I got a problem. No, I cannot. Oh, this one. Yeah, thanks. You saved me. Thanks a lot. So for risk assessment, in general, it is considered as the multiplication of the vulnerabilities in the system and what are the potential threats, because for different systems, the threat will be different. And the impact that the vulnerability has been used, has been exploited, then what are the impacts of the attack? So these three are the major factor of risk assessment. And this part it's not that important at the moment because we may cover it later on. And in general, we want to minimize the risk in a system. And there are two ways to assess the risk. One is quantitative, another one is qualitative. The quantitative, like you have in a system, you have all the assets, like the hardware, how much is it? The software, how much is it? Then you give a value of each assets, and then the group evaluate the impact. Okay, if the hardware is stolen, then what we can do, how much we would lose. And for the, it's not just the hardware itself, it could be the important softwares they have bought or some important data, customer data in the system. Then they need to evaluate the impact. And then for each of these assets, they get the total risk. So in this way, it's a quantitative risk assessment. Another way is a qualitative assessment. In this one line, they just set the impact of the attack is high, medium, or low, like quite the general classification of the impact. Then in the total, you will get the whole picture. It's like in the textbook, you see this low risk and this the consequence is less serious, very serious, something like this. Yeah, you get the idea. That's enough. We talk a lot about cybersecurity. We talk a lot about security controls, and it might have the kind of misinterpretation. Like we can use all these security tools to protect our system very well, and we are in good shape. Unfortunately, it's not that case. There are many reasons. First of all, we cannot have 100% security. That's, I think everyone can understand it. And why we cannot have 100% security? Why we cannot have strong security in practice? There are several reasons. So for the first one, I think that's the major factor in most of the cases. So for most of the organizations, most of the companies, they run their business, they want to make money out of their business. And they know if there are some security breaches, especially serious security breach attacks happen to their company, then they will lose money. They know security is important. They need security, but they cannot make money from being secure. It's like it's a kind of side. It's not that important factor to most of the company. Only if the security breach happen and then realize, oh, okay, it's important. So that's the first reason. Another one, without the business in mind, let's just talk about some technical or performance. Basically, security will have extra operations on the data, or it will introduce extra actions in a system. So in most of cases, there's no way that strong security will harm the performance of the system. And also it will cost resource. Here resource includes like the computing power and CPU and the memory and all these things. So because some of them will be used on the security controls, right? And the third one is pretty much as the similar as the first one, like security is only important when security breach happens in a company. This is the most case in many companies. Nowadays, in bigger companies, in IT giants, for those big players, they invest a lot on security because it will hurt, any security breach will hurt their reputation. And in the long term, it will hurt their business a lot. But for small companies, for startups, they don't have this much resource to invest on security. They can just, okay, cross finger, like develop some software, develop some website, then they know, okay, security is important, but they don't have enough resource for it. Then what they can do? They have to survive. Then, okay, cross fingers for security. That's for many startup and mid-sized company. And then security itself is very complex. I'm not kind of scaring you, but when you dive into the details of different security mechanisms, each of them is very complicated. For cryptography algorithms, for firewalls, and it's like you want to protect the system and you need to know all the details of the system. You want to make sure everything works as it was planned, as it was designed. Then if you have to understand all the details, right? Otherwise, how can you protect it? So in general, from technical perspective, it's quite complex, it's quite complicated. And another factor is security is determined by the weakest link. For the attackers, they just need to find, okay, where is the vulnerability and try to use some tool to attack it. And for the security experts, for administrators, they need to have an overview of all the assets in the system. And they need to have the overview of the vulnerabilities of all the system. Then which of them is the weakest? And that would be the point, that would be the surface that attackers are mostly interested in. That's difficult. And the last one, it's also contribute to the difficulty of keeping secure, because security is not independent. It depends on devices. It depends on the network. It depends on other technologies. It's an evolving process. It's not a single technology. So it develops, it evolves as other technologies evolves. As I mentioned, for the previous one, the security has to have an overview of the system. When one piece of the system, one piece in the system evolves, has some new technology, then we need to keep up with it. We need to catch up and to make sure the new technology won't introduce new vulnerabilities. Right? So that's the kind of some factors why security in general is hard and it's not that easy to achieve. So what we do in practice is all people, all organizations have limited resources. Then what we can do is to invest reasonable amount of resource. This resource could be some money, some time, human resource, some devices, and then to keep security risks at an acceptable level. This acceptable is also quite subjective. Like for the same event, for the same attack, it could be acceptable to some organizations, but totally intolerable by some other organizations. So it depends on the organization view, like what is acceptable, right? And the security experts is trying to make its own organization secure at an acceptable level and to remain the security risk at that level, not increase the security risk. That's the practical goal of cybersecurity. So that's pretty much the lecture of the overview of cybersecurity. So in the last few minutes, I want to introduce you an interesting tool. It is quite handy. It's called the canary token. And I will share with you afterwards. When we as individuals, like we mentioned, okay, there could be some attacker when we connect to the internet, someone is hacking on us, hacking the system. Someone is stealing some files. Someone is open our files and see some sensitive content in our file, right? And for individuals, how can we know? We use it as normal. We don't really detect it. We don't really know what happened behind, right? And these websites provide different security tokens, and it can be used as a holy spot for attackers. Like here, if I choose, you see that different files. Here, for example, I choose a Microsoft document. Then here, I will need to provide my email address. Like normally, you should provide your regular used email address. Here, like suppose I use my university email. And then I just have, suppose I want to save my passport information, my bank account, sometimes my daughter's personal ID, I didn't remember it all the time. I want to get information when I need. So I want to store most of this sensitive information and in a file. But I'm a little afraid when the multiple attacker open the file and read this sensitive information, right? So what I do is, okay, then here, after these steps, you can create this token. Then I download this Microsoft file. Okay, now it's already here. And then suppose I want to store something. Here, what the information I provide is fake information. And suppose, okay, like my UIB password is, I just type something. And like my bank account, and then some like personal number and passport. So you can fill in some information here to make it very attractive to attackers. Because suppose you think of if an attacker hacks into a system and wants to steal something, what he would want to steal. And you have sensitive information, you have like then I save it as like in my desktop as an like all my important something, okay, information, right? Something like you can, and then yeah, you save it. So what will happen is that if an attacker or a software hack into your system, then he will mostly scan the system and to find some keywords that he's interested in. Now here, okay, important. That would be a keyword, right? And the software might open this file to get the content of the file, or to send this file to the backend, to the attacker, which was mostly remote attack. Oh. And in this case, if I go into my email, when it was opened by anyone, then I will receive an email alert that, okay, your file is opened by someone, by some entity. And mostly it will also give you the IP address, which if it is remote, which IP address, which machine, which tool, which user is open your file. You will get this alert information. Then in this case, you will be, okay, my system would be hacked, or I could have some virus in the system. Then you can run antivirus software to scan your system or to clean up the virus. Well, that's quite handy. And let me see whether I receive it. You see here is it gives us information. You can try it out at the group session or at home, and I will share the link with you. Okay, let's stop here. Wish you all have a last weekend.